talking about. His passion is incredible. And does he want to get paid? Yeah, they all do.
Yeah.
But you know what? He wants to play. He wants to be on a football field. I guarantee if his salary cap was dropped and no one got paid, he'd be the first one to show up again on the football field because he wants to play football through and through.
I agree, and that's one of the reasons why he's always been one of my kind of favorite players to watch. Just that passion, just that love of the game, and whether it be football, whether it be baseball, whether it be something that doesn't even have to do with sports. If you love what you do, then I think it's easy for other people to want to be around you. And so for all the talk about his holdout or the distraction, I would just watch the way that Earl Thomas or perhaps some of the other players that have held out, watch the way the teammates react to them when they get back on the field. And if they really love the game, then I think that their teammates are going to show that as well. And that was one of the things that you saw the respect from the Arizona Cardinals players. They were kind of tapping him on the shoulder as he walked by. And I think it's not just because Earl Thomas has the interception numbers or whatever that he has. It's because he plays the game the right way. And so I think that was something that was kind of obvious with the way that the other teams, other players throughout the league reacted with news of his injury.
No doubt about it. They identify. They know who is and who isn't.
Exactly. I think they're some of the best scouts in the league. I think, or sometimes are players because they know who can play. It's one of the things. This is kind of on an off note, but one of the reasons why I'm so proud to work with the Morris Trophy Award and with the Pac-12, and we literally ask the Pac-12 defensive lineman, okay, who's the best offensive lineman that you played against? And the best offensive lineman, who's the best defensive lineman you played? It's always fascinating to me to hear from a player's perspective who they think are the best players, and oftentimes there'll be a name I hadn't thought of, and then I watch them on tape, I'm like, wow, they were right.
No, they identify, don't worry, especially in the NFL. They identify toughness, competitiveness in a football player. No doubt about it.
Well, and there are certain programs in college football, kind of switching gears here, that of course are so well known for producing that type of talent, and their coaches, their recruiting staff, and their players do recognize that kind of talent. And so I wanted to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about one of the teams that has been a big producer of that, and that's the Ohio State Buckeyes. And we talked before about the injury to Nick Bosa and the fact that we don't think that that's going to impact his draft stock at all. Of course, assuming NFL teams get a clean bill of health and assuming that Nick Bosa does indeed go early to the NFL. But, you had an opportunity, I believe, to watch Ohio State play Penn State this past weekend. I was curious, just your thoughts on Urban Meyer's latest collection of future NFL players.
I think they're very talented. I'd be surprised, honestly, when it's all said and done, if it's not Ohio State and Alabama playing for the national championship. The thing's unique about the Big Ten, there's a stereotype for the Big Ten. O-line, D-line, overachievers, not a lot of speed on the field.
Yeah.
Ohio State plays like an SEC team.
Yes, they do.
They have talent everywhere. And they got, they bring backups in that can run, that can make big plays, offense or defense, and for them to come back in that place, Happy Valley with 100 and some thousand people, that's not easy to do. I think that quarterback's a really good football player. I really do. I could see him being an NFL guy no matter what, and a legit NFL guy. But they're coached so well, on both sides of the ball, and they play with discipline, and it's typical Big Ten stuff, of course, discipline. But they have athletes. They have speed, they have quickness, and they have playmakers. And I was very impressed. And you know what? And the quarterback at Penn State, McSorley, played really well. Really well. But Ohio State wasn't going to lose. They found a way to win it. And it was a big-time game, big-time stage. And I just see them going forward. They're going to be hard to beat.
Well, a couple of things to bounce off of that. I think that, for one, that the young quarterback for Ohio State, Dwayne Haskins, he's a redshirt sophomore. So if he decided that he wanted to come out early in this year's draft, then he could. And I have seen some of the tools that lead me to believe that he could also, as you mentioned, be very successful in the NFL. I'm not necessarily saying this year, but if they do go on to compete for the national title, and if they win, then I think it's easy to see how a player might jump at that opportunity. And he had so much hype coming into this game about just these sparkly numbers, but the fact that his statistics weren't all that impressive against Penn State, to me, does not matter one iota. It's kind of like what we talked about with Patrick Mahomes, in the beginning of the show. It's the fact that he went into a very hostile environment, given the huge expectations of that game, and to have kind of gutted his way into a win. Now, some of the passes they completed, little quick dump-off passes, give Ohio State some credit. For the playmakers that they have outside of him, as you mentioned, Scott. But I agree with you. I thought the poise, I thought the creativity that he showed late in the game, it to me was more impressive than some of the beautiful touchdowns that he threw in mop-up kind of games against teams like Oregon State or something like that. I just don't. That doesn't mean nearly as much to me as the poise shown to win a game in a hostile environment, especially from a young quarterback.
I totally agree. And that's how you measure guys. Touchdown to interception ratio is important, but it's wins and losses, especially wins on the road against a very good team. Because like you said, he just stuck in there. Was it his best game stat-wise? No. But you know what? He found a way to win. And that's what you look for in a quarterback, plain and simple.
Well, and speaking of that, kind of sticking with college football, but another guy who won was Chase Bryce, who was a true freshman at Clemson that stood up and got a chance to play because their other true freshman, the very much ballyhooed true freshman Trevor Lawrence, who got the job because Dabo Swinney, the head coach of Clemson, opted to go with the, frankly, in my opinion, more talented quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. But at the same time, it is questionable timing. Going with the freshman quarterback against a Syracuse team who you and I talked about earlier, Scott, had been pretty impressive so far this season. Came in, undefeated and really on a roll. And this is a Syracuse team that had beat Clemson a year ago. So I was surprised by the timing of it. But I wanted to kind of just get your thoughts. I mean, you've been around the game so long. You've seen so many times where teams have made maybe controversial decisions to go with the quarterback. I know with Washington, RG3 moving on to Kirk Cousins, things of that nature. I remember the conversation you and I had as you were making that, you were at least having that conversation with others at Washington to kind of say, hey, this might be the direction we go. Can you just talk about, maybe your thoughts personally on Clemson, if you agree, disagree, if you have any thoughts that way, but maybe just kind of, your background in talking with coaches or quarterbacks about making that switch. I mean, it is different than any other position.
Well, it's a very unique setup there. The situation was very unique from the standpoint, they got a 5-star quarterback that's true freshman that has played some, prior to, Brian letting him going. And has played well, and he's a guy going forward. But I honestly think, and I don't know this because, of course, I'm not at Clemson, but I think Dabo did it as a favor, saying, because the new rule with the 4 games and you can redshirt and transfer. I think he did it as a favor for him because he knew his futures with the freshman, Lawrence. I mean, and that was plain and simple. And I know Dabo's a person. He's a very good guy, and he did this. I almost can guarantee it as a favor, for Brian, just from the standpoint to listen. You're going to be the backup, okay? We got a freshman that we really like that we think is going to be really good, and we got another freshman that we like. But then all of a sudden, Lawrence gets hurt. It's like, holy smolies, we should have him back, But that's a new rule, and I think you're going to see it more often than not. Not more often than not, but you're going to see it more often from the standpoint where guys are going to be like, okay, listen, I'm a junior, or I'm a senior. I got a year left if you're in a red shirt, and say, listen, you're our backup now. Why don't you, if you want to play, you're going to need to transfer somewhere. But the thing like with Kirk and with RG3 or Russell, Robert Griffin,
Yeah.
It was it was pretty evident, And I first took the job. I said in the press conference, I said, listen, let me be around him. Let me see him in OTAs. Let me see him, in mini camp. Let me see him in training camp, and then I'll give my opinion. And it was split in the building because powers that be really liked Robert, which I understand. He was rookie of the year. Took him to playoffs and all that. But I'm just like, listen, this is my opinion. This is how I see it right now. Kirk's the guy. It's not even close. And I'm knocking Robert because he competed and he tried hard. But he came off a couple of injuries too, which affected his play style. But those conversations have to take place. And you have to make tough decisions. There's no way around it. I don't care nowadays with college, with the amount of money those coaches are making, and the importance of winning. It's like the NFL. Same thing. You have to produce. You have to succeed, and you got to like I said, players know players, and if they identify, okay, well, coach was preaching about we're playing the best 11 on defense, best 11 on offense, best 11 on special teams. They know who they are, especially when you get done with training camp. Yeah. And if you don't do that, and they're like, okay, well, why did you say that if you're not doing it? So-and-so is better than so-and-so. Now, they won't come out and say it to the coach, but they say it in the locker room to each other. Exactly. Well, I thought he said, this guy won the job. Why isn't he starting? And that gets tricky now. That can get you in a bad spot really quick.
No, exactly. And I think that's the coaches that do live by that principle, that say it, make it very clear to their players, and then live up to it and actually do that. I think those are the coaches who often are the ones who are most successful. I mean, I think that, it's the proof is in the pudding, so to speak, and that if you are going to have that philosophy, then you have to actually live up to it. If you don't, then you're going to lose the trust of your players, and I think that they are, that's one of the ways that a team can fall apart really quickly. And because Dabo Swinney has had the success that he has, and the fact that Clemson was able to survive that game, to me, it really kind of reinforces the fact that is not just a collection of incredibly talented players who are, many of whom are going to be going on to the NFL, but truly a team. And I think that's why you said before that you thought, Ohio State and Alabama was going to be a national championship. I still think Clemson is the team that is right there. And I'm very curious to see what's going to happen with the rest of the SEC teams. I think Alabama is far and away the most impressive team so far. And I can't really knock Ohio State at this point, but I'm a big believer in Clemson, big believer in that defensive line. And if Ohio State doesn't get Nick Bosa back, as intriguing as some of the young talent that they already have on that team, that number 2, Chase, it looks like that Ohio State just kind of just reloads, I should say. But Clemson's defensive line is pretty spectacular as well, and I don't know that the rest of that ACC it can compete the way I think that the Big Ten could compete with Ohio State as we get down the stretch.
Yeah, well, think about it too. Don't forget about Georgia and Oklahoma.
Exactly.
It's a great year.
Yeah, or LSU for that matter. I mean, number 5 team right now. I mean, they're that's the thing. I'm looking forward to watching some of those, especially the SEC games. To watch Alabama and Georgia and LSU and Auburn for that matter. Another good team, a team I think is a little bit more one-dimensional, and so that's why I have some concerns of whether they can do it all. But the teams that we talked about before, certainly Alabama, and then Ohio State, and Clemson, to me, are the 3 teams I've been the most impressed with as far as all around. But that's assuming that Trevor Lawrence can play and be the Trevor Lawrence that I've seen flashes of, but I've yet to see that type of consistency from, because obviously the injury. It is interesting to see that, at least at this point, we're recording Tuesday night, but that Trevor Lawrence, Clemson's quarterback we talked about before, is expected to play this next weekend's game against Wake Forest. So very curious to see if he has Clemson right back rolling.
Yeah, no, agree.
Well, finally, one last thought. We talked about some of the power programs, out there, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Clemsons. Every one of those three teams has at least one future NFL first-round pick, in my opinion, among the defensive line. But what I am just so staggered with, Scott, is it just seems like every game I watch, I find